Hey guys, it's Ted Bogert with the Ted Show. We are back. Very excited, kind of honored, I have to tell you, to have Mr. Senator Randolph Bracy with us on the show. Hello, Senator. Good afternoon.
Hey, Ted. I'm doing well. Good afternoon to you. I feel honored also to be on your
Well,
show.
thank you. I love your work. I love what you are doing. I don't do a lot of research on guests, but I figured I better at least know a little bit before I went into this. And I just was constantly amazed. And I want to talk about your work, but I would love if you would give my audience a little background. They love origin story, and then maybe kind of lead us into why you became or how you became a servant leader, a public leader.
Well, I would take you back to, really my parents. My parents have been serving the public good in a different way in ministry. My mom has an interesting story. She integrated the public school systems of Alachua County. She was the first
Wow.
in Gainesville, and so she wrote a book about it. It's funny. I was on another show and I mentioned it, and then they had my mom as their next guest. But
Oh,
but she,
I love
but
it.
she, yeah, but she has a great story, and so I guess I mentioned that because her being the first and having such a difficult uh, story about integrating the public school system, um, she impacted me. It's just as far as like just making a difference, being out on the front lines of change. And she ran for public office shortly after I graduated from college.
So you have it in
And
your blood somewhere.
yeah, so she asked me, I do really, I get it honestly. And so I ran her campaign. She lost that campaign, but from that point on, I've been involved in local politics. And when the opportunity came, I felt compelled to run. I never wanted to, but um, an opportunity came, and I thought it was for me to do it, and I won, and I've been serving in the legislature for the past 8 years, four in the House, and then four as a senator. Yeah,
What was
that's
the
my
biggest
story.
surprise when because it's one, I think we all have aspirations. Most of us want to make a change. We don't know exactly how to do it. So public
Mm.
office is probably the most public, for lack of a better word, way to
Right.
get out there and show people. But then I know I've had a lot of elected officials on, and I always ask them, what was the thing that surprised you most when you got into the system? Because it's different being on your side than it is being on my side of that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would just say that question. I think I was frustrated, to be honest. If I was totally honest, when I got to Tallahassee, I never thought I would do it long. I just said, you know what? I have a couple things that I believe in that I want to change, and once I do that, I'm gone. I guess it was pretty naive because I didn't get any bills passed. Although I tried and did everything I could, it wasn't because of a lack of effort. It was just the system, the process. Being a minority, in the minority party as a Democrat, and the Republicans controlling the House, Senate, and the governor's mansion. The opportunities to pass legislation that my community wanted to see was difficult. But anyway, that's what I would say. It's sometimes frustration and
And still, oops, and still is probably we love, and probably still is. I mean, I'm sure that you've got ideas, you have things that you're passionate about, and there's a whole system and a process in place that you have to try to maneuver through. Um, I think people give politicians a bad rep when all you're trying to do is maneuver through a system that's been set for a very long time to try to get your ideals out, which you did. So I want to spend time talking about it. I read an article on you that you introduced, and correct me if any of this is wrong, the part of the bill that included the Ocoee Massacre being included in the Florida history books that we're going to teach,
Mhm.
our curriculum. It was not included before, I guess. So can you give us a little history, maybe, um, give us a little bit about Ocoee Massacre for those who don't know, and then tell us how that became important. Why was that something that you thought was really necessary to be included?
Sure. So the Ocoee Massacre happened exactly 100 years ago when the city of Ocoee had a black population of maybe 500 people, but you had a lot of black people who owned their land back then. There was one man in particular, July Perry, who was very wealthy. He was like a broker for the black and white workers in that town. He kind of ran the town, and he amassed wealth, and he there was a lot of jealousy because of his stature and his wealth. But not only did he have a lot of land and such, but he also organized on the election, the presidential election 100 years ago, the black community to vote. And so, he was denied, and a massacre ensued. Basically, not only did he own land during that time, but he had the audacity to now organize. He was well ahead of his time, and so it's still to this day the bloodiest day in American political history because it happened on the presidential election day in 1920. And so as we were approaching the 100th year anniversary, and I started to watch, even in Congress, some of the conversations about reparation, this story has been kind of in my mind and heart for a while about about the Ocoee Massacre. And I just felt like it was time for this story to be told on a larger scale. And I think it's time for America to deal with its past. And I believe, and I talked about reparations. I put reparations in this bill because, again, not only was an entire group of people slaughtered, but their property was taken. And that was supported by the state government. The state government deputized the mob that went in and burned their people's houses, killed all these people. And this was the times. The city of Ocoee supported it, as well as the state and Congress. Congress later made an opinion on what happened and supported the mob in their actions. So the state, I believe, owes a debt. When you talk about land theft, and there have not been any repair for that, we have to have a conversation about that. So, just forget about the generational trauma of killing an entire generation. What about the actual financial implications? That is documented. And so that's really what started this whole process. And so I filed
I didn't know about it until I read that article. And that's just an honest, and so that aggravated me that I didn't know it. I'm a product of Florida schools. And I just was amazed that it wouldn't be included. Such an important, just so important and so impactful. And I was really, really flabbergasted that we weren't teaching it. What's that like? I want to go back to reparations in a minute, but I have a question about what the process is like for you, because you want to include it, but that's the first time I've ever seen like a specific incident in history be legislated in. So I was fascinated by that process. How did that work?
Well, I engaged the Senate president, who I'm a Democrat, he's a Republican, but we had a good working relationship. I reached out to him well before our legislative session and just started to talk to him about this story. And I knew the 100th year anniversary was coming up. So this was last summer, and he was intrigued by the story. He had never heard of it. And the more he read about it, he said, let's do something. I'm willing to help you. And so once I got the Senate president who runs the Senate, who sets the agenda, that's a big part of moving something like this forward. And so the reparations piece of the bill was more controversial. So you had some people that just couldn't stomach that. And so, but with the Senate president's backing, I was still able to move the education piece of that bill, and also the what I would call the memorialization of it, basically saying that the Secretary of State has to look for state facilities. Orange County Public Schools will look for naming opportunities in their facilities. So with his backing, we were able to move it forward. And then we had the obstacle of passing it in the House. And so the House never moved the bill at all. So it has to pass both chambers. So even though I passed it on the Senate floor, there was no vehicle in the House to pass it. And so in the last week, I attached it to a Holocaust education bill. And so that Holocaust education bill became a much bigger bill with my piece of language in it.
Love it. I want to ask about reparations. I think that people people are confused. So a lot of times the differences or divisiveness. I'm a big believer in education, and I think that people get caught up in a big picture on reparations. Can we talk about reparations? Because you've got the Ocoee reparations, which, as you explained it, if people are listening with an open heart, you can 100% understand there's property involved. When you talk bigger picture and we get into larger reparations, I think people get lost, and unfortunately, they lump it all together. So on the reparations side, what would that look like if that got through? Was that going to give reparations to the descendants of the people who were involved, massacred in Ocoee? What was that going to look like? Because I want people to have a clear understanding of what reparations means, and this is so backyard for us that I want us to really be able to touch it and feel it.
Yeah. So there was a financial piece that was going to go to the descendants of the victims. I mean, it was simple, but there was conversations with myself and the Senate president about how we do it. Is it direct payment to the descendants? I initially had it where it would be $150,000 per descendant, and that was the max that they could receive. So, depending on how many descendants there were and how many people could provide that proof, and there was a whole system and how that was done, that would determine if they would get the maximum. But we also just discussed about scholarships. If you know about Rosewood, or if you've heard about Rosewood, they basically did just scholarships for the descendants, and that was the first basically state given reparations,
Yes.
state appointed reparations, and it's right here in Florida. And what's interesting about Florida, I mean, Florida has such a dark history when it comes to racial violence. Many people don't know Florida has had the most lynchings of any state per capita in this country. And so I just think we have to have an open conversation. And many times, as I started to research this, I mean, I came forward with the Ocoee bill, but then I had people reach out to me from all over the state. Have you ever seen what happened in Perry, Florida, or what happened with the Newberry Six? And I was like, as I started to look at this, Florida was terrible when it came to its treatment of blacks. And so, and at the crux of all of these different incidences was black people with substantial wealth at that time on considerable amount of land. And that was really what drove the violence. And so when you talk about the wealth gap in the United States, when you've had government supported terrorism, government supported land theft for decades, and then even when lynching was abolished, then you had government policies that would not allow people of color to get loans for property. I mean, it just
Mind-boggling, really.
Yeah, I mean, how do you not? I don't know. How do you not consider it? So anyway, that's just my thought on that. But
will it happen?
But
Do you believe the reparations will? Because that part of it, the bill got passed, if I'm not mistaken, or moved forward without that in it. That part did not go through. Will you be reintroducing that? Are we going to continue that fight?
I will. Absolutely. I think it's relevant more than ever right now. So I will. And there was some support, some surprising support as I moved the bill forward. No one really knew about it. I shouldn't say no one, but the majority of people in the legislature didn't know about it. But by the time at the end of the session came, everyone knew about it, every legislator. And so, for an example, the guy that I put who carried the Holocaust bill in the House, a powerful House chairman, mentioned that he wants to look at reparations for this incident. And so I think as people are educated about what has happened, and the more we just get comfortable talking about issues about race, I think people can start to see what has happened in our past in this country. And there is a legitimate reason for it, I believe. So
I think it's the open dialogue is so critical. I'm trying to engage more and more leaders to come on and talk and have an open dialogue. I think people get so caught up. Social media can be your best friend or your worst enemy, or some days it's both. And I think people get so frothy on social media, but I just feel like those dialogues are just a lot of back and forth hate without education. And I'm very happy when someone like you will come on a show like this and we can actually show that two human beings can have a discussion, and you're giving us facts and nobody here is spewing anything hateful back. Are you hopeful? How are you feeling with everything going on here? Do you wake up in the morning and you have a sense of hope? Do you have a sense of cautious optimism? Where are you at?
That's a good question. I'm hopeful. When you see these protests, this unrest that's going on, I still think that there's some necessity to it. I mean, I don't condone violence, but I think because of like what has happened with George Floyd and some other incidences, I think people are a little bit more aware, and they're a little bit more willing to talk and willing to be a little bit more open-minded. I saw, or maybe heard a podcast where just the fact that it is believed now that Black people may be treated differently by police. I've heard people say like, oh, they didn't believe it, but I think because their relationship with the police may be different. So, I don't know, police may come by and take their kids to a program or something like that, but Black people have just a different relationship with police. Right. And so when all of this starts to be documented, you can start to see, because of social media and camera phones, just the fact that someone says, wow, I mean, okay, that was wrong. But it's not like this just started, but it's more
There's
available.
momentum. I feel like we have momentum. I feel like we have, momentum. I feel like we're moving in the right direction. It's certainly the loudest in my lifetime that I remember, because I was born during maybe the early parts or the later parts of the civil rights movement in the 60s. And so I've never seen anything like this, but the unification of the efforts seems to be making some sort of an impact. And I also feel a little bit hopeful. What's next though? What do we need to do next, or what are some of the things that you think the community, because in one of the articles you talked about pivoting and making impactful change, and I love that. What are we pivoting toward? What's next?
Well, I think that I'm putting forth legislation that I believe in. I have some police reforms, and as I was talking about police, I want to say that I'm definitely not anti-police. I believe there are good people in the police force, and so I just want to make that clear. But I just think if we can have open dialogue about what's going on, I think everyone's better for it. But I have certain reforms. I mean, I don't have all the ideas. I get some ideas from people that just write to me, And I just try to be a conduit for my community and say, you know what, that makes sense. Let's do it. Um,
Agreed. I mean, but that's where we're at, right? We know it, so let's keep it. I want to encourage people on the show, especially whenever we're having these dialogues. We've got a lot of comments, people saying, "This is great. I didn't know about Ocoee. I want to learn more." We just have to keep having these discussions.
right.
It can't stop. It can't all of a sudden. We can't be distracted by the next big thing, which we in America tend to be. We forget very quickly. And I just pray a lot that we continue to have the open dialogues, and move it forward. I don't want to see anything go away until we make some significant changes. And by
Right.
significant, I don't know what that is, but it's got to be better and different than what we have right now.
Yeah.
So let
I've
me ask
got
you,
some.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead. I'm sorry.
No, please.
No, I was just saying I had a 10-point plan that I proposed a couple weeks ago on police reform, and just a mandate to wear body cameras, um, the citizen review board, giving that a little bit more teeth. I mean, I think the sensible reforms I had were something that I think people should agree on. And I mean, having an independent investigation when there's excessive force complaints, because normally a police department has the internal affairs. They're investigating themselves, and so
Yeah, you want
it's
checks
a
and
conflict.
balances there.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, I think there are sensible reforms out there, but we have to come to a consensus. But anyway,
What are
so
you? What are your plans for the rest of 2020? Do you think that are we going to be opening up? I ask anybody who's elected official what their thoughts are, because Miami just shut down yesterday. I don't know what the case count was today, but we live in a very interesting state compared to the other states, and
yeah.
so I think it's just such a toss-up. I'd love to hear what you think.
Well, this is the governor's decision. I mean, the people elected Governor Ron DeSantis, so that will be his decision. I think that one, he takes direction from.
Oop. Hopefully, he'll be back. Did we lose you, Senator Bracy?
Hello.
Yeah, I can hear you. Guys, as he's hopefully coming back, I mean, this is why we have to continue to have open dialogue and open conversation. Um, Senator Bracy and we lost him for a bit. Maybe he'll come back on. We have to keep having open dialogue where we can voice what we're feeling and thinking in a constructive, adult manner, respectful manner, and we need to be able to not fear that there's going to be ramifications or consequences if we're asking a heartfelt question. So some of the things, let me bring Senator Bracy back on. Hello.
So, hey,
Yeah.
sorry. So I
No,
was just saying
go
that,
ahead, please.
yeah, that would be up to the governor to decide. But I think he's concerned about the economy and what happened when we did shut down the economy. So I think that's more important to him.
So I like to ask about heroes. Do you have a personal hero, professional hero, somebody that you think of when you hear that word immediately? Somebody come to mind?
I think my parents. I think I've got, I guess, some spiritual leaders that I follow and listen to that keep me encouraged. Certain pastor, my current pastor, uh, people like TD Jakes. I mean, it's hard to. I'm a big sports guy, so I played
Who's
college
your team?
sports. I like the Warriors. I mean, I was a Magic fan. I guess I'm a fair weather Magic fan because right now I'm not a big fan. But back in the day with Shaq and Penny. I was big fans then. I like the Warriors. I like Steph and just the way they play. So, yeah.
All right. So tell us how we can best reach you if we want to. I mean, I have it scrolling across. I have your your URL, your website, and your
Okay.
Facebook link. What's the best way for people to get involved with what you're doing? If they say, hey, I love this, I want to be more educated on it, I'd like to do some work in my community. What's the best way for them to do that and reach out to you?
Yeah. They can call our office 407-297-2045. I would follow me on all platforms: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, at Randolph Bracy. Um, we really give a lot of our information on social media, and just reach out to us. We're always active. We're always doing community events where we're feeding people during this coronavirus. We are trying to provide jobs in our community. We try to just have our hands in a bunch of different things to help our community. So if you need help, unemployment issues, we've really been busy. Our staff has tried to. We filled so many calls and emails to help
I
people get
can't even
access.
imagine.
Oh my goodness, it's heartbreaking.
It's heartbreaking. I see it every day, and I just have so many people I know who have been impacted, and it's hard. I don't know how you recover when you can't get but that's a whole nother story, the system itself. But
Yeah.
I just want to give you huge kudos. I think what you're doing is amazing. I love the work that you're doing. We'd love to have you back on maybe toward the fall when we've got an update. But thank you for coming on and having an open conversation. I think it's important for us to continue to do that. And I'm sure your plate's full with these kinds of discussions all day long.
I'm happy to do it, Ted. I appreciate you having me on,
Absolutely.
and you're a good host. I enjoy this.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. Senator Randolph Bracy, reach out to him on social media. I've got his website and I've got his Facebook there, but you can find him on Instagram as well. LinkedIn, I found him too. Thank you again, Senator, for coming on and for all that you're doing.
Thanks again. You
All
got it.
right, guys, we'll see you back around 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. What time is it? Yeah, 3 o'clock with some music.